The Kansas City Chiefs were on the verge of history. By being on the verge of 3 consecutive Super Bowl wins, they were already doing something historic. No team in the Super Bowl era ever got this close to achieving the three-peat. Then they proceeded to have a beatdown even worse than what happened against the Buccaneers earlier this decade. What the hell happened? How did the Chiefs get shut down through nearly 3 quarters? And what does this loss mean for Mahomes and the Chiefs dynasty? Well, for starters, football is won in the trenches, and this is the second Super Bowl where the Chiefs learned the hard way that a strong offensive line makes the difference. Throughout the season, the Chiefs have had to deal with an offensive line that was lacking in quality tackles. The interior was elite, but in the modern NFL, having an elite tackle, especially an elite left tackle, is a necessity. The offensive line often showed weakness, but before the Super Bowl, not a single defensive line caused enough problems for the Chiefs to expect a repeat of the Buccaneers Super Bowl. Then finally, they faced an Eagles defense full of talent at all 3 levels. In the process, the Chiefs offense never got going. Despite the Eagles not blitzing, the Chiefs were pressured on over half their dropbacks. Looking at the film, it is obvious that the Chiefs offensive line was completely outmatched, and I believe this was the primary reason for the loss. It's also the main reason the Chiefs lost against Tampa. Except one big difference to me is that Mahomes had little to do with that loss despite the box score. On the flip side, Mahomes in this game ended up with a very nice box score, but anyone that watched can say with certainty that he could have played much better. Mahomes made some very boneheaded plays that killed any chance of a Chiefs comeback, like this pick 6 to Cooper DeJean. He had another bad interception, but that one was partially because Joe Thuney got wrecked and made Mahomes lose his balance when making this throw. The fumble in the 4th was also, to me, more of a bad offensive line than Mahomes screwing up. But also, why no flag? I thought the Chiefs were favored. I thought they were rigging it for them. Speaking of which, the reffing in this game was pretty bad for both teams. Not sure this should have been a penalty, not sure this touchdown drive should have been possible, and not sure the Eagles needed an extra 5 yards for all their field goals. I never believed the nonsense that the league was rigging it for the Chiefs, and if they were, why the hell did they allow the Chiefs to lose the Super Bowl of all games? A few of these penalties contributed to the league getting out of hand. But of course, the biggest advocates for the league rigging it for the Chiefs will be silent. Believe it or not, the defense should not get blamed too much for this loss. I do believe they focus way too much on trying to shut down Barkley, which is a similar mistake to what the Broncos did against the Seahawks, where they focused way too much on trying to shut down Marshawn Lynch. But the offense failing to get going, and Mahomes making a few boneheaded plays, had more to do with the loss. The play calling was bad as well, too pass focused and too conservative. While the 3 touchdowns were in garbage time, I can't help but think letting Mahomes run loose might have worked better. Since hiring Matt Nagy as the offensive coordinator, the Chiefs have opted to be a death by 1,000 cuts kind of team. I was willing to put up with it if it meant championships, but I'm not sure if that's the strategy going forward. Worthy is a speedster, and he showed up in the Super Bowl, and it's been frustrating all year how underutilized his speed was. Rice will be back at some point next season. I think the Chiefs have their wide receiver 1 and 2 for the foreseeable future, but I'm not sure if Kelce should continue playing or not. He was not good in this game, and might be turning into more liability at this stage, but is a legendary tight end really going to retire after that? He was supposed to propose after this game. He'll probably play another year, but the offense should look at Kelce as more of a safety net once Rashee Rice is back. As far as the Chiefs dynasty, it's still going, and will go until enough time has passed since their last Super Bowl win. They won last year, so they have plenty of time before we can conclude that it is done. To win 3 Super Bowls in 5 years, 5 Super Bowl appearances in 6 years, and 7 conference championships in 7 years is unprecedented in the Super Bowl era. To do it in the salary cap era makes it even more impressive. These are the greatest 7-year stretches in NFL history, at least in the Super Bowl era. The Steelers were the only ones in that group to win 4 rings. The second Patriots dynasty was the only other one, besides the Chiefs, where the minimum was a conference finals trip. For me, the Chiefs' 7-year dynasty run is the best out of all of them. The second highest winning percentage, the worst outcome was a loss in overtime in the conference championship, and they were the closest to three-peating. They also achieved this in the salary cap era, which gives them an edge over the Steelers and 49ers' best run. In a 7-year span, there's no better run by a team, at least in my opinion. This dynasty was historically dominant, and it was unique in the sense that it was driven mostly by the offense, and in particular, the brilliance of Patrick Mahomes. The mid-2010s Chiefs had a very potent offense and also usually had an elite defense, but they went 53-27 in the regular season and 1-4 in the playoffs, which is a far cry from the dominance we have seen in the Mahomes era. The mid-2010 Chiefs had a top 8 defense in points allowed per drive, the best metric for defense in my opinion, 4 times. The 2018 to 2024 Chiefs have had a top 12 defense only 1 time, 2023. We do not have this kind of data for the Steelers and the 49ers, but the Steelers had a top 2 defense in points allowed 4 times, and another where they finished in the top 5. The 49ers had a top 3 defense in points allowed 6 times. I personally don't like points allowed because it does not account for how many drives the defense played in. The 2024 Chiefs were 4th in points allowed, but 13th in points allowed per drive. So I'll use top 3 scoring defense for the older teams to try and adjust. Meanwhile, both Patriots dynasties happened in years where we had that kind of data, and for them, the 2000 dynasty run had 5 defenses that ranked in the top 6, while the 10s dynasty run had 7 defenses in the top 12 and 4 in the top 8. These 3 dynasties were led by great quarterbacks on offense, usually with the initials TB, but ultimately they were dominant because they were elite on both ends. The Chiefs had been relatively one-sided, yet they had been arguably the most successful dynasty out of those 4. And that is a testament to how great Patrick Mahomes is, and why, despite the disappointing performance, I do not believe he is out of the GOAT debate. And that's the next part of this video. What to make of Mahomes' legacy? For starters, who has achieved what Mahomes has achieved up to age 29 and year 7 as a starter? No one. In the Super Bowl era, no quarterback has won more Super Bowls and won more MVPs before turning 30 or after their 7th season as a starter. And Brett Favre, a similar quarterback, is the only one that has won up Mahomes at one of those, winning 3 MVPs by his age 29/year 7 season. But Favre has significantly more help on both sides than Mahomes has had, for wherever that is worth. Mahomes' first 7 years as a starter are basically Peyton and Brady's first 7 years rolled into one. Manning's numbers and Brady's wins. But he's been a much better playoff performer than either up to this point. No one, absolutely no one, has a better first 7 years as a starter in the Super Bowl era when combining performance, accolades, and winning. That being said, there is a cautionary tale here about prematurely declaring someone the GOAT, because Brett Favre had probably the second best start by a quarterback in the Super Bowl era, and his career regressed badly after turning 29. Mahomes has been better and more consistent, even adjusting for era, but there are similarities, and Mahomes' perception can skydive like it did for Favre if his 30s become very inconsistent. Based strictly on what Mahomes has achieved, he has not played long enough. Based strictly on ability and what he's capable of, he's very much in that conversation. Personally, I have never considered Brady the GOAT, but for the sake of this exercise, we will use him as the standard. Mahomes is well ahead of where Brady was by age 29, and you would have to get to age 34 before Brady starts to have an edge in overall body of work. By that point, Brady was also in 5 Super Bowls with 3 wins and 2 Super Bowl MVPs. He also had 2 regular season MVPs. Pretty similar to Mahomes, whose numbers, even adjusted for era, have been better, and who has never missed the playoffs or gone less than the conference championship game like Brady had multiple times up to that point. You would have to extend Brady's career up to 2014, his age 37 season, and 13th full season as starter, before he definitely has a career edge. By that point, he's had about twice as many Pro Bowl caliber years, but also a 4th ring, 6 Super Bowl appearances, and still as many regular season MVPs. I mean, if it basically took Brady twice as long to start having a better overall body of work than Mahomes, I think that's telling me that Mahomes is well on track to surpass him, so long as he avoids the same fate as Brett Favre. And for those that want to argue that he cannot surpass Brady because of 2 Super Bowl blowouts and the 0-2 playoff record versus Brady's teams, well, first of all, many were saying that Brady would never surpass Montana after 2007 and 2011. Montana went 4-0 and never threw an interception in the Super Bowl. Brady needed 2 Super Bowls to throw an interception and 4 to not go undefeated. He also lost to a much worse Giants team, which I would argue is more embarrassing than Mahomes losing to some very loaded Buccaneers and Eagles teams. That narrative eventually stopped being a deal breaker for people because Brady kept winning and kept playing at a high level. For most football fans, it just did not matter anymore because Brady was redefining what greatness was to a lot of people. It wasn't about playing better in the playoffs, being perfect in the Super Bowl, and never turning the ball over in the Super Bowl. Brady was none of those. It was about constantly playing at a high level for 2 decades and winning so many Super Bowls, often overcoming a big deficit. Mahomes, like Brady and Montana before him, needs to redefine greatness. Like Unitas, Marino, and Peyton, he is the most productive and most valuable quarterback of his era. Like Starr, Montana, and Brady, he is the greatest winner of his era. And like Jurgensen, Elway, and Rodgers, he is fun to watch and very electric. Tom Brady never won a Super Bowl with a defense that ranked outside the top 10 in points allowed per drive. I assume Montana and Bradshaw also always had a top 10 defense in points allowed per drive in their 4 Super Bowl wins if we knew the numbers back then. Mahomes has won 2 Super Bowls already where his team's defense ranked outside of the top 10. That to me is redefining greatness. For Mahomes, it's about dominance. He's already the fastest to achieving so many milestones. For Brady, his numbers really did not start to stand out until much later in his career. Another thing to add is that Mahomes has always had the less talented team in the Super Bowl, and yet he is still 3-2. In contrast, also, Brady has had some embarrassing playoff losses. Just because they didn't have him in the Super Bowl does not make them better. And he also stat padded a few times as well. Here's some clips. There's a lot more to add, but I'll keep it at that. Mahomes has and will continue to redefine what greatness is. Bill Russell won 11 rings in 13 years. He is by far the greatest winner in Boston history. But Larry Bird, after 1986, was considered by many to be the greatest ever. Premature, but Bird redefined greatness for many. Then Michael Jordan led the Bulls to a three-peat before turning 30. And for many, that was enough to rank him as the greatest ever. That is despite so many guys winning more rings, more MVPs, more scoring titles, and also despite Larry Bird having a 2-0 series record against Jordan in the playoffs. Most people did not care, because Jordan redefined what greatness was. Jordan came back a few years later and led his Bulls to another three-peat. Just the cherry on top, as for many, he was already the GOAT, well before the start of the second three-peat. While I will always consider Jordan greater than LeBron, LeBron's doing his own thing to redefine what greatness is. His longevity is ridiculous. For many, that's enough. I'm not one of them. I also believe the rings narrative makes way more sense in basketball than in football, which to me is the ultimate team game. But my point is, the narrative still favors Jordan, but it is getting closer and closer as LeBron continues to redefine greatness, and also as we're getting to a point where a lot of basketball fans do not even remember watching Jordan play. And that's what Mahomes needs to do. He needs to redefine greatness. Being the best, most productive, most individually accomplished, most talented, and being the most prolific winner of his generation is redefining greatness. No quarterback in NFL history can say they were all of that outside Mahomes up to this point. And if he maintains that after a few more years, it will be interesting seeing if the narrative shift is in his favor. As for the 0-2 talking point, well, again, Bird was 2-0 against Jordan, and Eli's 2-0 against Brady. It's a stupid talking point, especially in a sample size that small. Peyton started 0-2 against Brady in the playoffs before winning the next 3. It is an overrated talking point that ignores a ton of context. For Mahomes' legacy, I'll end it at that. Now for Reed and Kelce, Reed's GOAT case should be dismissed by now. When a team collapses on all phases, it is more of the coach's fault than any particular player. And Reed was the head coach for 3 Super Bowl disaster classes. He is also now 3-3 in the big game. It is fascinating to me that some people are way more open to calling Reed the greatest head coach ever over calling Mahomes the greatest quarterback ever. The gap between Reed and Belichick's resume is greater than the gap between Mahomes and Brady's resume. And despite having so many talented squads in Philadelphia and early in his career with the Chiefs, Reed saw little postseason success until Mahomes became the starter. The Browns and the early 2020 Patriots teams that Belichick coached were lacking in star power and yet were still respectable. To me, it was never a debate, and it's never going to be a debate. As for Kelce, I will always believe that Gronk was the better tight end, but Kelce has longevity and is also a great player performer in his own right. For me, it goes either way. Gronk was the better tight end and more well-rounded, but Kelce has longevity. Dominance versus longevity. I prefer dominance. And that's where I'll end it for the Chiefs. For the Eagles, this team was great, historically great after a slow start. Saquon was amazing this year, and the Chiefs did a fantastic job of trying to shut him down on his birthday. But in the process, they allowed Hurts to go off. But he also went off in the first matchup. His performance earned him Super Bowl MVP, and he's starting to get his respect. But it's hard to ignore that he has an extremely talented team around him, which is why I cannot rank him with the Big Four. But he's right there with anyone else. He's also 26. He's in a very good position to potentially lead a dynasty of his own. But this Eagles team is great because of how well-rounded this team is. Football is still, ultimately, the ultimate team game. And that is it for this game. It did not go the way I hoped it would, but hopefully the Chiefs will be fun to watch again. Hopefully the discourse about legacies start to be more sane after this video is posted. Later this month, I will aim to post a video about talent for Peyton Manning, which, as far as regular season goes, is the pinnacle of quarterbacking. Cyber out.